Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I'm so glad that you could join us this week, and I'm thrilled to be back and bring an old friend to chat the Fablemans. Welcome back, Wade Bearden. I'm excited to have you.
Hey, thanks, Steve. I'm always up to talk Steven Spielberg, so I've been waiting for this call. Waiting for it. It finally came.
I have you on speed dial when it comes to Spielberg, so I do appreciate that. The Fablemans tells the story of young Sammy Fableman as he falls in love with movies after his parents take him to see the greatest show on earth. Armed with a camera, Sammy starts to make his own films at home, much to the delight of his supportive mother. The film is directed by Steven Spielberg as a partial biography of his life. And as always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But Wade, what did you think of The Fablemans?
Rated S for spoilers and rated S for Spielberg. Well, Steve, it is my reputation as a Spielberg fan precedes me. I am just kind of in awe of his work. I've seen all of his movies, even his TV films, his made for TV films. And as this film was about to be released, there were trailers that were hitting TV, internet, and it said, the film that fans have been waiting decades for. And the reason being is because it is, like you said, semi-autobiographical. Spielberg really leans into his upbringing. And for those of us who have studied his life, read about his life, a couple of great documentaries out there about Spielberg. This is not going to come as a surprise. What happens in the film is not going to come as a surprise. And saying that, to be able to have someone like Spielberg, who is not like we were talking about James Cameron earlier. He's not somebody who is public. Well, he's public, but he's not someone who's always promoting himself in a way. He's more comfortable with his influences. He's told his story. For him to kind of really turn the camera specifically or explicitly inward is really powerful here. He's talked about his life, and in each way, every movie he's made has been about his life. But this is a film that really kind of puts all of those pieces together, and we get, in many ways, his vision of art, influences for him personally, motivations for him. He really kind of digs deep and says, why am I doing this, and what does art mean to me? And so as a Spielberg fan, it's really special to see that, for us to say, well, this is what motivates him, this is what drives him. And we've kind of heard about this before, but we get to see it in the medium that he helped to define the last number of decades. And so yeah, I think it's a pretty special film, and I really liked it.
I absolutely agree. I saw the film at the film festival in Toronto, and the crowds were going nuts for it. Spielberg has a way of telling a story in a way that makes it feel almost mythical,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's about his own life. And I think this is such an interesting project because I can't think of another example of a director who has had a filmmaker who's had an incredible career and is, he's not getting any younger,
Mm-hmm.
but he's still cranking out great products. Last year was West Side Story, and people were talking about that as being a Best Picture winner. But I don't know if I've ever seen a director say, "I'm not going to let anybody else tell my story
Hmm.
for me. I have the time and the ability to share a story that matters to me, that encompasses my life or aspects of it." It's not called the Spielbergs for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've never seen anybody who can say this and say, "Let me tell you my story" in such a way that people would go nuts for it and have it feel so special as
Mm-hmm.
this one does. It's so fascinating to me because the film feels big but is incredibly small.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a ton that happens. I mean, in the
No.
life of this family for sure, but plot wise, it it's interesting what you're saying. Like being kind of hard pressed to find something similar to this in other people's work. We've been introduced to films before that are semi autobiographical. So something like Roma or Belfast, where it's, hey, this is my life, this is me growing up. But this film is different because it essentially reveals how Spielberg became a
Yeah.
director. And I could see a story like this being created by someone else
Yes.
after Spielberg passes away. And it's like this is the focus of Spielberg's early life. Um, and so it really is interesting. And I think there are going to be people that really get into it and people don't, because it's a hard topic to tackle and a story to tell, because you have this famous director who's basically talking about how he was a prodigy. Like he's basically
Yeah.
saying, when I was a kid, I thought about filmmaking in ways that certain professionals don't now. And so that's really tough. And then at the same time, he digs into really deep topics. I think divorce is probably one of the central motifs of this movie, and it's definitely one of the defining moments in Spielberg's life. And yet, this story is almost kind of mythical. This is not a story that's rough and and really just kind of sinks into a marital strife. Uh, it's not something that's I would say incredibly gritty or even super realistic. There's a polish to it. There's a sentimentality to it that sort of undergirds a lot of Spielberg's work. So I think there are going to be people who really get on this train and people who don't. But for someone who is this mythical American character and he's telling this story about his life, I thought the delivery mechanism for this movie really worked for me. It was heartbreaking, but also kind of beautiful in many ways.
Well, Spielberg's films, the marker of all of Spielberg's films pretty well is a sense of optimism, even in the films that aren't
Yeah,
optimistic.
yeah,
And you're absolutely, I see, I like what you said there, because in the hands of anyone else, I feel like it would just be like, look at how
yeah,
great I am. But
yeah,
Spielberg, he does it in such a way that he's like, it almost feels humble isn't the right word, but it's
hmm,
because he's telling his own story, but he's just sort of it's just sort of honest but in an
hmm,
optimistic way. Like you said, this isn't Marriage Story. He's not sitting there
yeah,
saying, "Look at how my parents ruined my life," and he could, like
yeah, yeah,
he could, and but he doesn't. I don't know. There's a loving reflection on every character, even the
hmm,
villains of this,
yeah,
that is remarkable. And it's funny because this feels like a goodbye movie, but I know with him it's not. That's what I mean. It
mm,
feels like he wanted to do this before anyone did it for him.
yeah.
And that's what it's such a strange mix to me, and I don't think that anybody else could have pulled it off without it. And there were no callbacks. Like there was no scene with him playing with dinosaurs and saying, "One day, one day." It's not like,
He's like, here's my favorite stuffed animal. His name is extraterrestrial.
yeah, yeah.
Wink, wink. I didn't
There's
even think about that,
he
but
wasn't he wasn't eating Reese's Pieces and going, and the
he's like,
camera looking
wow.
longingly at it like, "Oh, okay." There's
It,
none
it
of
is funny
that.
it's funny you say that, because on my notes here I wrote down Easter eggs. Okay,
Yeah.
and for people who are pretty familiar with Spielberg's work, even maybe people who aren't, because we all kind of know about his work, even if we haven't seen all of his movies. He does a nice job of helping to kind of reveal some influences on particular stories. So you definitely have like E.T., the divorce aspect.
Mhm.
He makes a movie, a film, a war film, and he actually did do that when he was
Yeah.
a kid. And you see some of okay, well, yeah, he would go on to make Saving Private Ryan and others. You see certain fascinations in this film, and if you're really into Spielberg, it's kind of like that meme with Leonardo DiCaprio where he's like, pointing at the TV.
Yeah.
Um, but it's nothing too over the top, and it's not like you said he's playing with dinosaurs or whatever. But it's just on the edges enough to where you can kind of appreciate, okay, that's why he always taught like parenthood and parents and absent parents are kind of a big thing in his work. Or uh, the uh, there's a clip going around of Spielberg being asked about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's kind of gone viral at the actor studio,
Mm.
and uh, the question is asked. You've got you've got these scientists trying to talk to these aliens, and music and art trying to talk to science and numbers. And was that your parents? And Spielberg is like in this clip, like, oh, I guess like maybe it was.
Mm.
Maybe he heard that for the first time, or maybe he was just playing like he heard it for the first time. I don't know. But in this film, you see those influences. Like, I get that. Like the communication between his mother and father, that it's not antagonistic. They're two different people, and it's hard for them to talk to each other. So you see those kind of small Easter eggs throughout the picture, but it's done in a very tasteful way.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is true because there when you, I would even question whether the term Easter eggs is the right term
Yeah,
because
probably not.
it's not a direct callback. It's like, look,
Yeah.
if anything, the films that he's made now feel like Easter eggs. Like
Hmm.
this, because now we're saying, okay, well, this was pieces of his story. And now we look back on, now again, like I followed Spielberg not to the depth that you have. But I mean, now with this one, I look back and I say, okay, like you said, influences. But I feel like his emphasis on story and even he takes the lens off himself in some ways, even though the film is very much. I mean, really, the film is about Sammy Fableman.
Hmm.
Um, but he puts such an emphasis on storytelling
Hmm.
that I think that it almost takes away from it being about him, if that makes any sense. Like this again, this isn't Spielberg saying I'm king of the world, this
Yeah.
which speaking of Avatar, no, I'm kidding. Um
Yes.
let's not turn it into that. But in all seriousness, like Spielberg does this in such a way that he never comes across as waving a flag and saying, "Look at what I've done."
Yeah.
It just feels like he's saying, "Okay, you want to know? Here, let's tell some stories."
Hmm.
Uh,
And I really do appreciate how he Sammy creates stories, and he creates movies, and he creates good stories, good films,
mm,
but he doesn't quite realize some of the influences that go into his stories, or
mm,
even he doesn't even know why he makes certain choices.
mm,
And I think it could have been easy to read his future success into his younger self a little bit more, and said, well, the reason he made this choice is because intuitively he realized this. But Sammy doesn't understand how his art connects to his real life. He's still trying to figure that out.
mm.
I know we're probably we might as well jump into it now, but one of my
Sure.
favorite sections of the film is when Sammy creates the Senior Beach Day movie, and he premieres it.
Yeah.
And essentially, one of the bullies who's after him is the villain in that film. And then the other villain is the hero. And there's this great scene in the hallway where the second bully, who is the hero in the movie, is basically like, why did you do that? And Sammy can't really answer it. And so you're thinking through, and it's like, well, okay, maybe he did it because intuitively he realized you need a good hero and you need a good villain for a movie to be accepted and for it to be compelling. Maybe that's it. Maybe he did it for revenge and he wanted to put the spotlight on both of those individuals and place one into the villain category and then put the other one in a category he could never live up to. Maybe he wanted to impress one of the bullies and he wanted him to protect him from the other. There's all that. And then maybe uh, he wanted to help one of the bullies get back with his girlfriend that he cheated on because it reminded him of his parents and their relationship. And he was using his art to fix that in a way he couldn't at home. And are those right? All of them could be right. One or two of them could be right. Sammy doesn't know. And we're not given a definitive answer. And I think that's a great look for Spielberg at his younger self, and perhaps even throughout his career. He's making these choices. He's crafting characters in E.T. where the father has abandoned the family. He's talking about couples who can't communicate with each other in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There are all these types of stories, and it's almost as if he's looking back and saying, I don't know why I did that, but I'm starting to realize maybe it's because of what happened to me when I was a child. And I love that honesty from him in this picture.
I love the scene that you're talking about there because oh man, this is what I'm saying about the film. The one thing the thing I like about this film so much is if you're going to tell your own story, he may be the central character, but I think the hero in this film isn't Sammy Fabelman. I think it's storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the real hero in this film because when he tells a story, it changes
Mm.
the room every time.
Yeah.
And
Even
although
when he finds out his parents, his mom's cheating on his dad, and he storytelling is the way that he communicates that.
yeah, he puts her in the well, it sounds terrible to say he puts her in the closet, but I mean he puts her in the closet and
Yeah.
says, "This is it," and he shows it to her, and it's just like and somehow it seems more powerful that way than if he said, "I know what you did last
Oh man.
summer."
Yeah. And
um,
we saw the clips earlier in that
yeah,
really great scene where he figured it out. We don't watch the film again. I think maybe we see a couple of clips and then it cuts away during part of it, and it's a really interesting. I mean, once again, he's using his art to express himself, or he's using art to comfort other people. Like, art is the way that he's exercising control over his world. And they allude to that at the beginning with the train, the
yeah.
train sequence and that crashing. He needs to control it.
Well, okay. So, side note, Judd Hirsch is the one of the quiet MVPs of this film, and he's in it for like 4 minutes.
Mm.
There's Oscar talk for him literally walking into the bedroom and going off on the kid with his speech,
Oh
and then he
man,
leaves. But
it's
it's such a
great.
phenomenal performance. So, as Uncle Boris, one of the things he says is that art is dangerous and a lion's mouth. And we're sort of talking about this already, but I was wondering, what do you think? What do you think the power of art is, and do you agree with that? Is art dangerous in a lion's mouth?
Yeah, I don't know if Hirsch's character is supposed to be a reliable narrator. And
Okay.
so we can't take everything at face value. But I think what he's attempting to say is you have power with art. And we see that in the film. One, he catches his mom with art. And two, he has the ability to dictate the emotions of the two bullies because of
Mm,
his senior movie. And so when he talks about that, there's power in that art. It it can change the perceptions of the people around you. It can be dangerous in many ways, for especially for him personally, when one of the bullies comes after him. And I so in one sense, is Hirsch this reliable narrator, this wise sage? I'm not necessarily, but his time, his experiences in life help him to realize that like art isn't just safe. Like it's not
Right.
just fun and games. And Spielberg kind of sees his video camera and the little movies he makes that like they're just fun, and it's not that way. And yeah, I mean, we even see that in the scene where he's filming the war picture, and he's giving direction to that one character who's supposed to just kind of keep walking, and it's revealed like there's something happening in Spielberg in his life and in his family, and it's overflowing into what he's filming and what he's doing. I say Spielberg, Sammy, but
Sammy.
essentially, right? They're the same person.
Well, see, that's a funny thing. And again, like, I'll talk about this in a few minutes, I'm sure, but it's not him. It is him. It's not
Yeah.
him. Like,
But a
I
lot of the
call it
stuff that happens to Sammy is what happened to Spielberg.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
such a fascinating line to walk. But I love what you're saying because that scene where they're first of all, for two reasons, I love that scene where he's filming the war movie. First of all, it feels like a little window into old school filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
I try to explain this to the youth that I work with, or even my own
Mm-hmm.
kids, because they're like, "Oh, that film is so cool," or that "Oh yeah, look at Doctor Strange or Avatar, all this stuff," and it's like, okay, that's great, but like when they're making Star Wars, and I know Spielberg's not associated with that, when they're making Star Wars, they're looking at this stuff. They had to like invent the magic.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just plug it into the computer screen to see what popped out on the other side. They had to do
Yeah.
these things, and you see a little window of that Spielberg with the board, and he kicks up the dust and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is the sort of thing that I'm like, oh man, you see there, and then you see it on screen, and there's magic in that moment.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
magic and a purity in that simple burst of dust. It's so fascinating to me. But the other reason I love it is that scene where he's coaching that actor, and he's or that young actor, and he's trying to get him to feel in the moment, and he just keeps walking. He's like, I want you to walk away, and I could be wrong whether it's I could be wrong. Forgive me whether it was a line. I don't remember if it was a line or a film or just what I thought. I'm like, is he coming back? He's just
Yeah.
he's just still going because to him it was saying a line, but Sammy helps him feel it and helps him
Mm-hmm.
realize, give meaning to the moment other than this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to
Mm-hmm.
feel. And I think that's the power of art is that the stories and the perspectives and perceptions, they can change the room positively or negatively. And Spielberg
Yeah.
knows that. But like that, going back to like you said, the beach day, that
Mm-hmm.
scene in the hallway is phenomenal. Like it's
Oh yeah.
just a brilliant scene. I love it because he changed the game.
Yeah.
And all he did was take moments that everyone experienced together, put them together a certain way, and you change the power of that story. And he does it, I think, in a healthier way.
Mm-hmm.
But and there's a danger to that. The lion's mouth comment, maybe, but I like that you said it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because uh, art is powerful because of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that's the case, and it
Yeah.
comes across in this film so beautifully.
Well, and it also comes to mind like how powerful, uh, how much influence a director like that has,
Yeah,
because Sammy changes the memory of Beach Day.
yeah,
So they might not be thinking about, and I forget the character's name, one of the bullies or either one, like they're just kind of there. But now when they think about Beach Day, they think about the movie that Spielberg made. So he has the ability to warp perception, warp memory just by controlling his movie. And it is funny you say meaning. So this is a good example of how certain films hit people differently. And
Mm.
sometimes it's just personal experience. Sometimes you watch a movie, a lot of people love it, and you're like, that's a well-made movie, but it didn't, I don't know, I just didn't connect to it. And other times you watch a movie and you're like, man, that was me. And uh, so growing up, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And so watching Sammy's story, I felt like kind of watching my story.
Mm.
I started out before digital editing, and so what you had to do is record on your VHS, and you had to play from one VHS to another and hit record. Like that's how you edited. And so when he's
Yeah.
editing these film strips, and you're thinking about how hard and how laborious it is, and it's like, man, I really. And then he's using firecrackers, and I remember I wanted an explosion once in one of my films. And so what I had to do is create a board and put it in front of a fan, tie it in front of a fan, and strap smoke bombs on it. You light them, you turn the fan on, and then you just run and kind of jump in front of it. And so like the burst of smoke coupled with your action in the films and the camera's placement, you create something that kind of looks like a little bit of an explosion. And so as I'm watching this, once again, I'm a Spielberg fan, but I'm watching his inventiveness, and it's the idea like you don't have digital effects
Yeah.
back whenever we made it. At least didn't have access to it, and so yeah, it's fascinating how it creates that meaning in you, and that goes back to just him also acknowledging his desire to control is what fed into his interest in filmmaking, to
Mm.
control and to create. And there is that fine line between director and self-perceived God, right? So it's nice to have him be honest about that connection, be like, yeah, like that's part of the reason why I went into this, is because I like to control what's on the screen and control these moments and create them for other people to see.
And that plays into so much, I think, of him telling his own story, as you were saying there, because we're talking about the separation of his parents, and I was what was it? Not Rogan. Seth Rogen. It was Seth Rogen's
Mm-hmm.
character.
Yeah, Benny.
Benny. And I'm like, here, that's a traumatic thing for any child to go through.
Mm,
But he controls the story now.
mm,
And there were things about his story that, from my understanding, that his dad didn't know that he knew, and that and he didn't know about his dad, growing up and all these things. But now he's got control of the story, and how he shares it shapes the way that we view his history.
mm-hmm.
Which actually is interesting, because there's a conversation that Sammy has with his dad, because of course his dad is bootstraps and numbers, like, let's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and his dad at one point bursts out and says, make something real, not imaginary. He says, I
Mm-hmm.
want to make movies though. But that line really sort of tapped into it for me.
Mm.
I'd love to know what you think, because are movies real or imaginary?
Mm.
And obviously, I'm
Yeah,
not
and that's
talking
it.
about dinosaurs or anything like that, but the stories.
Yeah, it is fascinating how he captures both his mother and his father and their perspectives, and there's so much nuance. It's funny because you have a character in the film, the Sammy's first girlfriend, the Christian girl, who's just kind of a walking cliche. Like
Oh yeah,
I mean, I grew up in church, and I've never met anyone like that. I mean, I've met some pretty cheesy Christians, but that's a little over the top. And yet, you see his dad, who supports him and buys all this equipment for him, but then is also kind of like, I don't really think this is like, I don't think you have a future in this.
yeah,
And it's so easy. It could have been so easy to go in either way, where it's like, he just doesn't support his dreams or anything like that. It's not the case. There's some nuance there. And then you have his mom, who, I mean, she supports everything he does, but at the same time, she's a firecracker, right?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. But in terms of like movies, it it's movies are real in the sense that art moves us in so many ways. And it's like, what's the definition of art? And there's so many people that try to define it, but I think one of the easiest, the best and simplest definitions is art is something that moves us emotionally.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean it doesn't move us logically, but it connects to us on an emotional sense and then affects our logic. And so when we look at a beautiful painting, it moves us, and it pushes us to consider the nature of our lives. When we watch a film, it pushes us to consider the perspectives of other people, or it connects to us and this piece of ourselves that we forgot existed. So it really does move us. And now, how long does it move us? Where does it move us? It just all depends on the art and ourselves. But that's real. And we're both Christians, and there's kind of this debate, or like, Christianity is it a religion where we just really need to connect emotionally with God, or is it something where we need to know God and know the character of God and learn the Bible intellectually? And the truth is, God created the head and the heart, and so instead of pitting them against each other, we see how they work together. That God created our emotions, and God experienced it. We read about him experiencing anger or love or this or that, and so when we look at film, there's this tendency to kind of mark it down as just like pure entertainment, or something that doesn't exist, but it does in a way that maybe a textbook doesn't. So yeah, the answer is yes. Like it's real, just kind of how you define real, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is the relationship, the redefinition of what is true.
Hmm.
And I was talking with somebody recently about I forget the film. I was speaking with so I was interviewing somebody about their film, and it was a biopic. And oh, it was for The Inspection. That's what it was. And
Mm.
similar story. So he tells a story, the writer director, and it's essentially his story, but the character is not named after him.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I said, "Is this your story?" He says, "Well, there are parts of it that are, and there are parts of it that
Hmm.
are not." And we got into this fascinating conversation because I feel like we're at a place in our culture that we hear so many stories, we demand to know the nitty gritty. I hear these
Mm.
things as like they'll watch the Elvis biopic or Rocket Man, and they'll say, "Okay, but that didn't happen this way." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm sure he didn't dance down the street singing 'Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting' as it was in the first as it's shown in the film."
Yeah.
But it's like we demand to know this, and we feel tricked, and it's like,
Mhm.
but
Or
every
we watch Tar, and we think that it's real, and we look it up on Wikipedia, and we're like, oh, that's fictional.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
or everything though comes down to perspective, especially when you're dealing with story. Like documentaries have a perspective. Two people can tell us a story of Spielberg's life and depict it slightly differently, or
Mm-hmm.
take different or call out different things. Um, you know, I found it fascinating. And I'm not saying there's no such thing as truth or anything. Don't hear me say that, but I'm saying like
Mm-hmm.
perspective shapes the way we share it.
Mm.
I remember years ago when Aronofsky came out with Noah, and which Noah, I mean, love it or hate it, it's fascinating on a number of
I
levels.
remember the Noah Wars.
Yeah,
I remember we lost many a good fighters during the Noah
the
Wars.
Noah Wars, I love it. But it's funny because again, it comes down like would you if you want to read the story of Noah in Scripture, it tells it from a very specific perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and the Noah film tells it from an entirely different perspective. And I think you read it from Scripture, it speaks of it from a divine perspective, from God's perspective. And when you read it when you see the film, it's like this perspective of where are you?
Mm,
It's a totally different way of viewing the same narrative. And I
hmm
know there's differences and all that stuff. I'm not arguing that, but
hmm
just merely stating that I think I think there is something real about film, even if the film, like, even if the facts are different. Like, again, we said before, this isn't the Spielbergs.
hmm
This is the Fabelmans. And Fable, even though it's spelled differently, is in the name.
hmm
In that way, the film sort of takes a mythological story or style
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, I mean, do we really think that Spielberg discovered his mom had a relationship with his this family friend while he was editing a video? Like, probably not. But that scene is so powerful for all the reasons that we just said. That this is a movie about the nature of art and how we cope with difficult
Yeah.
circumstances in life, and we seek to control those circumstances. And so that scene of him discovering and revealing that affair through art says something pretty important. And that's cinema, right? That's important. And I will note too, so there's this great scene with Reggie Fableman, his sister,
Mm.
played by, I believe it's Julia Butters, and he is editing together. I think it's the Summer Beach film, but it's after his family or his parents revealed that they were separating, and the sister, accuses him of a number of different things. And when I first saw that scene, I was like, okay, I feel like she's being a little harsh. But then I started thinking about the movie and I realized that this is a film from the perspective of Sammy's character. I keep saying Sammy and Steven and mixing them up. It's Sammy, right?
Sammy.
And we're seeing it from his perspective. And in that scene, she gets to share her perspective on his actions.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really fascinating. She has an entirely different take on what he's done throughout this story from her vantage point, and that was really fantastic. And too well, I want to make a couple points, but Michelle Williams and Paul Dano, they're so good in this movie. They're really fantastic. But in terms of perspectives, so I appreciate what this movie says about divorce. It reveals the effects of divorce. Like, it's not just this little game
Yeah.
where everyone's just trying to be happy. Like, there are repercussions to that. But there's this scene, it's near the end of the film, it's after prom, and Michelle Williams's character is in the kitchen and she's basically saying, hey, like, I'm about to do the most selfish thing I've ever done, and I got to do it to be happy and to make Benny happy. And then she basically says, follow your heart.
Mm.
And the camera kind of like moves back away from that scene and it fades to black. And for a split second, Steve, I thought that was the end of the movie.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, like, you get the perspective on divorce and those choices from like this current Hollywood vibe. Like, it's follow your dreams. Okay. And I was like, I'm kind of disappointed that that's the message we're going with here. But then the film cuts forward and we see his father, Paul Dano, is not living in this warm house anymore. It's a very plain, cool apartment. He gets a picture seeing his wife with someone else, and that really hurts him.
Mm.
And we see just a glimpse of the effects of that divorce on the family. And so what you get is you get this mom's perspective, follow your heart, but then you also get the repercussions. And I love how the film just kind of lets us see both of those. And we walk away saying, yeah, like, she made a choice that brought some happiness to her, but like, there's no right choice here. Like there was going to be unhappiness somewhere. Someone's going to get hurt, and her choice might have actually caused more people to get hurt in the end. Who knows? Um, Obviously, as Christians, we have a particular perspective on divorce, but Spielberg allows us just to kind of see the hurt and the pain that goes alongside of that message of, just follow your heart.
You know, that I love that you're saying that because the film does that in so many ways. But again, perspective and time. Like
Hmm.
here he is, and he's in his late 70s, and he's looking back on his life with the similar lens that he brings to his films, as we've already said. But I kept thinking as I'm watching, like there is such a level of grace to his whole family throughout this film, and he doesn't need to do it. He
Hmm.
he could easily. I mean, and we can sit there and say, well, his mother made, certainly she's making some painful decisions. His
Mm.
father his father makes some painful decisions,
Yeah.
different ones. Um, but it's painted with such a brush of grace
Mm.
that it's. I mean, this is the thing about and I'm not saying this is the greatest film of the generation or even necessarily or even of the year, but it's done in such a way that you can't help but but appreciate each member of his family for what they bring to the table, even if you don't agree with their decisions all the time. There is
Yeah.
something about this particular way that he tells this story. There are people who make bad decisions, but there are so few villains, if any.
Oh, yeah.
Other than the obvious ones, like the kids who are bullied, the anti-Semitic remarks, like that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But when it comes to his family, he does it. There's no real villains. I'm
Yeah.
amazed at that. That's remarkable to me.
Yeah. His mom is captivating in many ways. His father, as I mentioned, is doesn't really believe in his dream
Yeah.
to be a filmmaker, but still supports it and was like, I should have, oh, maybe, but he's still there buying him equipment and giving him a place to stay. And it's really just kind of fascinating how those characters are portrayed. And it does make you it does make you wonder what Spielberg would have been like if he wasn't able to forge his way through this situation with grace for both families or both sets of his family. Uh, and you mentioned the positivity in his films, how they're always, well, I don't say always because you've got films like AI and Munich, but most of them are optimistic in many ways, where it's like there is real hurt and there is real pain, but yet there's always the bright side. And the phrase that I've used about Spielberg for over a decade is he's always chasing the sunrise.
Mm.
And he's not afraid to like look at the sunset, but he's always chasing that sunrise that's right in front of him. And then the end where he
Oh,
meets
so good.
John Ford. Sammy meets John Ford. Apparently, Spielberg really did meet John Ford, and then the fact that um, you have David Lynch playing that part. But even what he says there, it's like high horizon is up high, horizon is down low. And with Spielberg, he's not this ultra gritty, ultra realistic filmmaker. He's got the sentimentality, he's got the optimism. Like his films don't just peer at life from a purely rationalistic perspective, and that's what drives a lot of people crazy. He has his spin on this story,
Mm.
and he's got the John Williams music for the story, and that's the horizon, man. It's never in the middle, it's up or down, right?
I love that as he walks towards that sunrise, the camera's there and it's like, oh wait, and it like moves up.
Yeah.
It's such a great moment.
I
And
would love to go back, and in the States here, the film just released on VOD today, as of us recording this. I'd love to go back and watch and just pay attention to the horizon throughout the movie and see if there are certain scenes where it's in the middle for a specific reason or if it's always up or down. Like I think there's probably something there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Um, be, honestly, the film is almost worth the price of admission just for the scene with him and John Ford.
Oh man,
What a
it's just great.
phenomenal point, like to end the film. I'm like, this is just, oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, no, it is something special. It's such a unique way to tell your story.
Hmm.
And not that we, it sounds silly to say that, maybe like it's a type of film that is good to hear at this time, because I mean, it's not that we just need optimistic films, because that would be insanity.
Hmm.
We need films that hurt and films that pull the layers back and
Hmm.
show us. But there's just something. It's one of these sort of things that, just like so many of his other films, is that sort of makes you believe. It makes you feel hope as you're leaving the theater,
Yeah.
um, and stepping forward. And you know, going back to perspective for a minute, every film you're ever going to see, every story you're ever going to hear comes from that perspective. Everything Everywhere All at Once comes from a perspective. Avatar comes from a perspective. All of these, and Maverick comes from a perspective. And I love stories that entertain, of course, because
Hmm.
we all want them. But I'm not gonna lie, I die a little bit inside every time somebody says to me, "I just want to go into a theater and turn my brain off." I've heard that
No.
quote so many times, my soul dies. Spielberg has a way of leaving a mark after the theater, or after the film is done, in that you can be entertained but still feel like he has something to say.
Hmm.
And I really truly appreciate that about this particular film.
And you always feel like you're watching a great artist. Even something like Jurassic Park, which obviously gives you something to think about man's desire to play God, but is generally perceived as one of his more entertaining works. You you see that footprint in the mud. You see the water that's moving because of the dinosaur, the T-Rex is coming. You feel like you're watching someone at the height of their creative powers.
Yeah.
And sadly today, uh, I guess I don't know. I'm sure it's been true for as long as movies have been around, but there are a lot of really popular blockbusters that for me are just kind of boring because one, there's really nothing to think about. The story's okay, but there's really no craft involved. You
Mm.
don't feel like you're watching an artist at work, but someone who's just kind of managing the elements. And so I I feel like I haven't seen as many great blockbusters as I used to for that reason. But then every once in a while, right, you'll get something like a Top Gun Maverick, or you'll get maybe, there are times a really good MCU film.
Mm.
And I know some people are listening is like, is that even possible? And there are a number of those movies that I do like, and I like the series as a whole. But you get these movies where you're like, I feel like I'm watching someone with a unique perspective and with vision, and this artist is this is an artist. And so yeah, we get that with Spielberg. We could go on and on about his placement of the camera here. He's really incredible, like in every way. And I think we just kind of take him for granted. He didn't none of his films showed up on Sight and Sound. He should have been the director's list. Jaws did,
What?
but on
None
the
of his
top
movies?
100 critics list, he's not on there. And so I just think we're going to appreciate him more once he is gone, and we don't get these near masterpieces every year. I mean, think about West Side Story. We talked about West Side Story. It's just an amazing film. We're getting those types of movies every few years from him or every year from him. And we need to appreciate him while he's around, folks.
It's absolutely true. And I mean, there is a next generation that's coming up. You've got your Nolans, and you've got
Hmm.
Nolan is not as optimistic, let's put it that way. But you've got your Nolans and your Ryan Johnsons, and
Mhm.
You know, there are innumerable men and women who are stepping behind the camera. Jordan Peele, you know, that, you
Yeah.
know, 10, 20 years from now, you know, could be that. But Spielberg's left his mark and continues. I sorry, he's leaving his mark. He, you know, but that's the remarkable thing about him is he is so unique in so many ways. I like what you said there. I'm a big Marvel fan. I've liked most of the films. I think they're fun rides, but after a while, a lot of them fall into the mold. I will say the new Black Panther is very different. I
Mm.
feel like
That's
from
good.
the
I haven't seen the new one. I'm
yeah
excited to see that. I like Ryan Coogler's work. So
yeah it feels different. It feels different, but I agree. I agree. Wade, this may be totally pointless, but we should screen it or skip it. Um,
yeah, I go through all that. And I'm like, skip it. You're
yeah,
fine.
the
Uh,
Fablemans. I mean, screen it or skip it.
if you screen it, definitely. If you can go see it in theaters, I liked seeing this in theaters. I'm like, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm always just like they don't make them like this anymore, right? That whenever I see a film like this
You
or West
sound
Side
like an old
Story,
man when you say that,
yeah, I'm
Wade.
sure they do. There are a lot of good movies out. But I if you can see it in theaters, it's like leaving as we speak. The final showings are happening right now. But if you can see it, check it out. If not, it is on VOD, but definitely screen it. And I assume you're gonna say the same thing too.
No. Okay.
Twist.
I've actually never appreciated the man's work. I find it reductive and and popularistic.
You're like, I do not like it when characters gaze up towards the camera. I don't like that stare as John Williams music, soars. I hate that.
I like a horizon right in the middle, Wade. That's the
I
way we
like it
shoot this
right.
podcast. That's the way. No, it's phenomenal. It's one of the best films of the year.
I
I think
agree.
it's a remarkable story. Um it's well executed. The cast is phenomenal. I think it's well worth seeing. I do think, you know, I mean, I think every film should be seen in theater, to be honest. But I think you can watch this one at home and enjoy it in the
Mm,
same way. Like if it's on VOD now. But I think it's the type of film that you can watch and enjoy and feel like it was a meaningful experience. I think it's wonderful. It's a great film.
yeah,
So definitely screen it for me
it's awesome.
as well. Wade, thank you so much. I really appreciate the chance to chat with you. I always do. And no, about Spielberg or anything else, but I'm so glad to have you here. How can people connect with you? I know you've
Yeah.
got a couple books out. You're on Letterboxd. How can people connect with you?
Yeah. So my letterbox handle is Wade Hance, HANCE. So if you want to reach out to me there, I have a website, wadebearden.com. I don't really do too much. I have Twitter and Instagram, so that's always possible. But yeah, I released a new book this year. It's called "To My Friend Who Left the Faith: A Letter to a Prodigal from a Prodigal," where I talk about some of the reasons why people leave the faith, and I tell my own faith story and what happened to me after high school. And so if people are interested in that, they can find it on Amazon and I think maybe barnesandnoble.com too. And you can check that out and hopefully you'll enjoy if you enjoy the autobiographical nature of Spielberg's films. This is a memoir and autobiographical in a sense too. So maybe you'll like that. But yeah, you can check it out. To My Friend Who Left the Faith.
Oh, appreciate that. And we'll look forward to your film, The Wablemans,
The
as
way I was homeschooled and I had five siblings, and everybody's always like, "Man, you just have crazy stories about stuff you and your siblings, you and your brothers." Did I had three younger brothers? I was like, you know what? Maybe let's do something. Let's write a story about what that was like.
hey, that sounds great. Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate having you on, and as always, a reminder for you at home, you can find us wherever podcasts are available, and we do like and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can find our podcasts on Amazon, Apple, wherever you are doing so. If you go to the podcast page on our website, screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are some small group questions, help you get the conversation started about story and the Fablemans with people that you see the film with as well. We will be back next week for Christmas, as we are going to talk about Spirited. Our Christmas special, we're going to talk about Spirited with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds. But Wade, thank you so much, as always. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.